Okay. By the way, there you got a brief snapshot of the world's most intelligent grandson. At least he was until January when his brother was born. So, well, great to have you in this class. My name is Mick Nelson. I've been at Broadway Church for about the last 8 years. And my only real claim to fame, and even having any credibility at all to stand before such an august group as yourselves, is for 15 years of my ministry life, I was responsible for children's ministry. Those were the days before there was the thing called a children's pastor. Does anybody here recall a time in your life where there wasn't children's pastors in most churches? Anybody? Anybody at all? And so as a result, I needed to be a leader in children's ministry because I was a terrible worker in children's ministry. Like, I could not keep the interests of 4-year-old boys to save my life. When I walked into the room, they started licking their lips and thinking, okay. But I was responsible for giving leadership to children's ministries and working with volunteers to make sure that our children were discipled to fame. I want to talk about a subject that we often take for granted and we really don't think about, and yet it is absolutely central to everything we do. Not only as we live our lives day to day, but also everything we do in leadership. So let me say a couple of things just to get started. Number one, language does not just communicate. It creates and it crafts. Words are important. They wound and they wow. They close doors and they open up brand new possibilities. Language is a living and a powerful thing. And the Bible tells us that we are responsible to be stewards of this gift of language. And as you go through the scriptures, we don't have time to do it today, there are numerous passages that tell us about the power of language and how we're responsible for what comes out of our mouth, okay? Do I have any pushback at this point? Is there anybody that has a sense that I'm really not responsible, that what comes out of my mouth? Anybody want to disavow any responsibility for the things you say? Anyone here at all? Okay? Because we all know this is true. We need to honor the gift of language by using it carefully, compassionately, clearly, and circumspectly. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Okay, some of you have read that passage. This is good. This is good. So, what I want to talk about is I want to talk about how we use language in ministry, and language in leadership, and language in life. George Bernard Shaw said the single greatest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. The notion that because you've said it, other people have got it. That is a huge, huge assumption. Now, the good news is that 90% of the time we use language well. 90% of the time we use language in a way that encourages and informs and inspires and blesses other people. So you're all A students, okay? Okay? You're all A students. 90% of the time you get this language thing right. But 10% of our conversations are those conversations that just go sideways. You know what I'm talking about? The ones that you would love to go back and have a do-over with. That conversation with your parent, that conversation with your boss, that conversation with a coworker or a sister or a teenager, that conversation with your neighbor across the way whose dog poops on your lawn. Like, you'd love to get those conversations back. Those conversations that power compared to the other things that we say. And every once in a while we find ourselves coming out of a conversation saying, what was I thinking? And of course the problem was, in that particular moment, we weren't. So 2 stories, personal stories. Remember these, I want to come back to them in a bit of time. So I'm working at the Bible college and I have a committee meeting and my supervisor is leading the meeting, and he does what we normally do today, right? He sends emails. And emails can summon you to a meeting, but emails don't always tell you what the meeting is about, do they? They just say a certain room, a certain time. So I showed up at the certain room, certain time, and I don't know why, on this particular day, I thought I was being called in to consult on a decision, an important decision that needed to be made. And so I walked in the room, and my peers were around there, and my supervisor at the head of the table leading the meeting, and we began to open up the issue that needed discussion. And as we were discussing the idea, I kept piping up with various ideas and perspectives that might help us to make a better decision along the way. What I did not know is that this was not a consultation meeting. This was a command decision that was being made. The supervisor had already decided what we were going to do, and he was bringing us in to troubleshoot it. So you can imagine, not knowing what was on his mind, I come up, I keep offering great suggestions, and what happens in the meeting? Anyone?
Just steps on
He keeps shutting me down. So I'm in this meeting for about 20, 25 minutes, and I keep getting shutting down until finally, he didn't say it quite as blunt as this, but essentially he said, Mick, would you just shut up? Okay? Now at this particular point, I thought the most brilliant thing in the world to do would be to gather all my things together, to stand up, and to say, which is what I said, it is clear to me, friends, that my opinion makes absolutely no difference to where this decision is going. And seeing as my opinion doesn't count, I want you to know I've got better things to do. Goodbye. And I walked out of the room. I want you to know that that felt so delicious at the moment that I was walking out of the room. But by the time I got to my office, I thought, you idiot, what were you thinking? Here was an issue that you cared about and that you really wanted to have input on, but was I behaving like it was an important issue that I wanted to have input on? Was I behaving that way? No. I just picked up all my toys and went home. Another scenario. I'm the lead pastor of a church. Morning. One of my board members comes up to me and says, we're all going over to this parishioner's house. Her son has Crohn's disease. We're going to pray for her. And I said, I didn't know anything about that. I said, well, I asked the board member who was leading the prayer team, and he said you weren't really interested. I said, excuse me? I said, did this particular family invite you to come over and pray with them? Well, no, but this board member thinks that they should. Anyway, afterwards, the mother who was kind of a friend of mine, of the child that had Crohn's disease, called me and said, do you have any idea what was going on here? I said, listen, I'm just finding out about it right now. So here I am, the lead pastor of a church, and one of my board members has sort of taken the initiative to go to pray for someone without asking them, and basically has told the other members of the board that I wasn't involved because I didn't care. How would you feel? How many of you can put yourself in the lead pastor's position and thinking, I've got a conversation I need to have? Okay? So I jumped in my car and I started heading down to his place of work. And there's a real problem when you have to travel like more than 30 minutes to get to an important conversation. Okay? Because what happens in the car on the way to the conversation? Okay, self-talk. Yeah. You start getting yourself pumped up. And even though when I started, I kind of wanted to, I thought through, I'm going to say this sanely and calmly and so on and so forth. By the time that I had gotten down to his office, I kind of worked myself into battle mode. And so I walked into his office, I sat down in a chair, and I said, George, his name wasn't George, I said, George, you've made me so angry, I just feel like punching your face in. Great lead line if you're a lead pastor, by the way, trying to assert your authority. Great lead line. And he said, I resent that. And of course, the minute he said that, I thought, you idiot. Like, why did you say that? This was not what you were planning to do when you came down here. And all of a sudden, here I am making this stupid statement. Now, friends, don't look at me so piously. You've all been there. You've all been there. And if you haven't had a conversation, then your life is probably stuck because you're avoiding the important conversations that could actually set your life and ministry free. So, I want to talk about crucial conversations, that critical 10% of conversations that, boy, wouldn't it be great to get them right going in? I mean, we never get it all right all the time, but wouldn't we like to raise our batting average from 90% to maybe 95%? Wouldn't that be great? You know, for some of us, 92, we would be 92. Thinking about conversations that can help us to do that. So, let me define what a crucial conversation is, for starters. Okay? A crucial conversation is a conversation where the stakes are high. In other words, the conversation matters. It's not about, you know, what's going to happen with the Canucks next year. Does anybody care anymore? Okay, no. Okay, so it's not about an issue that really is that trivial. It's about something that actually matters. And there are differing opinions. Opinions vary. You're not all on the same page. Okay, so there's different perspectives. And here's the clincher. Emotions are running strong. A crucial conversation is one that takes place between two or more people, where the stakes are high, it matters, opinions vary, not everybody's on the same page, and emotions are running strong, and the outcome has a tremendous impact upon what's going to happen next. Now, there are three ways we can handle crucial conversations when they arise, okay? And so here are the three ways. We can avoid them, and some of us do that. I'm not asking for a show of hands. We can face them and handle them poorly, i.e., my two stories. Or you can face them and handle them well. When conversations matter the most, that is, when conversations move from casual to crucial, many times we're generally at our worst behavior. We do our worst when it matters most. Think of a conversation you've had with a coworker. Think of a conversation you've had with your spouse. Think of a conversation you've had with a teenager or a neighbor or somebody in your community organization. Can you remember a conversation that you'd really like a do-over if you could? Wouldn't you like to be able to avoid having to have those do-over kind of regrets at the end of the day? That's what we want to deal with. How can we raise our batting average? How can we do our best when it matters most rather than doing our worst when it matters most? There's a few reasons why we handle conversations poorly. And I'm going to share a couple of them. Number one, let's just face the fact, and folks, there's physiological evidence for this. We are just designed wrong. I'm not criticizing God. Trust me, okay? I'm not. Biology tells us that when we are under stress, we start pumping out adrenaline. And when our bodies start to pump out adrenaline, it's a signal to our body to move blood from our higher thinking functions to our big motor muscles. And so some people have called to our, okay, and basically we are now into fight or flight mode. When we're threatened, we tend to move into flight or flight mode. By the way, it used to be really helpful when you were running away from saber-toothed tigers. But sometimes saber-toothed tigers are more figurative than literal these days, but it still kind of generates the same kind of response. And the reason why you look at yourself and think, what was I thinking? Why was I such an idiot? Is because in that stress-related conversation, you actually dumbed down. Your physiology worked against you. Do you remember that old saying that if you are kind of really angry and you've lost your temper, that you should go and take a 10-minute walk? Do you know why that is? It's to kind of get out there and let your adrenaline kind of rebalance itself so you can get your thinking brain back into the picture. Now, it was an old wives' tale, but it actually has some physiological basis. So one of the reasons is because biologically we're in a stress-related action. We tend to dumb down. Somewhere along the line, if we're going to do better in conversations, we've got to jump-start our brain again, get our higher functioning thinking back into the picture. But when you are high on emotion and when you are as mad as a hatter, it's really hard to think rationally. You ever notice that? Ever notice that? Number two, many times when we run into a crucial conversation, we're under pressure because they catch us by surprise. Isn't that true? I mean, sometimes you know you have to have that conversation with your 3-year-old adult child who's living at home, right? That's a crucial conversation that you know in advance is one that you need to have, and you can kind of prepare for it. But a lot of crucial conversations don't give us a lot of time. They take us unaware. And so you're having a discussion with your spouse, and we're talking about something that seems fairly casual, and you're talking about cooking and this meal that's going on. And you say, yeah, well, that's really good. It's not as good as what your mother makes, but that's really good. And all of a sudden I can tell by the body language, this conversation's just become crucial. It wasn't crucial when we started the conversation, but it certainly is crucial now. There are some statements that we make that kind of push us into the crucial conversation category. And usually our big signal that the conversation has become crucial is your emotional temperature has just risen, or you look at the person you're talking to and their emotional temperature has just started risen. That should be an opportunity for us to say, okay, hold it, I got to take a different tack. Now most of us run right by those warning signals, and the next thing you know, we're all yelling, or nobody's talking, or one yelling and one's not talking. I mean, you know how it all goes. I'm glad that you're smiling, because it tells me you're an audience that knows exactly what I'm talking about. We do this because we're just stumped. Not all of us really think well on the fly when what we were expecting to take place doesn't take place, and all of a sudden we're trying to rationalize and come up with reasons and defend our point of view, and we just do badly. Somehow or another, we just can't seem to say the things that we want to say. We kind of feel stumped, we're confused. And then when that happens, we act in a self-defeating way. Self-defeating behavior. We do or say exactly the wrong thing. When I went in to talk to my supervisor in that committee meeting, my desire was what? To make a positive contribution to the decision that was being made. That's what I wanted. When I walked out petulantly, I basically behaved totally in opposition to what it was that I really want. I didn't really do what I wanted. I did something I didn't want to do. My behavior was self-defeating. When I went to talk to my board member to try to sort out this misunderstanding, my idea was to bring him on board and hopefully have a stronger relationship at the end than we had at the beginning. But what took place? In the middle of the crucial conversations, I changed tacks, and I actually behaved exactly the opposite of what I really wanted. That's what happens in crucial conversations, is that sometimes or another they prompt us to behave in self-defeating ways. So these crucial conversations are those moments that have an inordinate impact on the rest of our lives. 90% of the time we get it right, but it's those 10% that we really would like to do better at if we could. So what are some common crucial conversations? Anybody? Let's just throw out a few.
Work performance.
Work performance, okay. Performance review, absolutely, yeah. Oh, discussions over finances. And of course, it's never really about finances, is it? Because finances represent something, right? Okay, what else? Politics, okay, can be about politics. Teenagers, yeah, different points of view on exactly what freedom means, right? Okay, we're on 2 different pages. What else?
Dealing with your in-laws.
Dealing with your in-laws. Oh, my word. I'm not going to go any further there. I don't want to tell any of those stories, but yeah, dealing with your in-laws. Ending a relationship, how about that one? Parenting, absolutely. How about giving your boss feedback about their bad behavior? Is that a crucial conversation? How about critiquing a colleague's work, giving them feedback? No, really, I want you to tell me how I'm doing. Well, don't worry about it, you're doing fine. No, really, I want to know. Tell me. Okay, well, if you really want to know, here's what I want to tell you. And then immediately you look at their face and saying, oh no, they really didn't want to know, but I'm going to... confronting a loved one about a substance abuse problem. Okay? Giving an unfavorable performance review, talking to a coworker about a personal hygiene problem. Crucial conversations. I just want you to understand that we traffic in these conversations all the time. And so let's do the very best we can at managing those conversations so that we actually bring healing and blessing into the conversation, as opposed to all that other junk that we end up trying to regret and unpack and make up for days afterwards. There's 3 responses to heated discussions, generally speaking, right? There's threats and name calling, okay? And I'm going to give a term to that, and I'm going to call it moving to violence. So when I sit down in front of my board member and I say, I'm so angry I could punch your face in, and by the way, if you get the finger going, very effective. There's nothing people really appreciate more than having somebody stick your finger in their face. I don't know what it is. It always gets a response of some kind or another. When you kind of get aggressive, controlling, defending your point of view, your voice goes up, you're moving to violence. Doesn't mean you actually hit a person, though I almost did. I threatened to anyway. But when you move to violence in the middle of a stressful situation, you are trying to overcome the other person. You're trying to control. You're trying to get your way. The other way of kind of dealing with it is walking out of the room. And we call that moving to silence. Okay? I'm just going to pick up my toys and go home. I'm not going to add anything more to the conversation. Or there's a third way. You can speak openly, honestly, and effectively. You can move to dialogue. And so in crucial conversations, we have three choices. We can move to violence, we can move to silence, or we can move to dialogue. Many times in critical situation, we make a fool's choice. We sort of get it into our mind that there's only two ways we can go. I can speak up and be honest about this, or I can save the relationship. And those are my only two choices. That's a fool's choice. I can either stand up for my rights, or I can just roll over. There are no other options. And I'd like you to start thinking about the fact that maybe there's a third option, and that third option is dialogue. Maybe we can talk about this rather than just react to what's going on. The most influential people are people who have learned how to get things done and at the same time build relationships. Those who have mastered the ability to do well in these crucial conversations. And so we want to avoid this fool's choice. When we are facing a crucial conversation, we often feel we have to choose between responding with violence, our opinion, or be respectful. We tend to leave out the dialogue option. So let me kind of start talking about, okay, well, what do we do with this actually? This is really what you're here for. You want to know, is there anything we can do actually to kind of get out of this place where these conversations keep deep sixing us? And there is. The law of crucial conversations basically says if you find yourself stuck, there's usually a conversation you're not holding or you're not holding well. And I find that many times, especially when you're dealing with volunteers, there's a lot of things that are going on and are affecting the situation, and sometimes the ministry is stalled because the team can't resolve certain issues. They don't have the conversational skills to actually push something through to a successful resolution. And so the very first thing that we want to do when it comes to this business of entering into crucial conversations and actually getting them on the table instead of running from them is we need to get unstuck. There is a little diagram that we kind of use in crucial conversations to kind of help people get the idea of what we're talking about. In a crucial conversation, there's always the before the conversation is held part. There's the in the conversation part, and there's what happens after the conversation's part. So if you can kind of think of every conversation having these three elements. There's a before, there's a during, and there's an after. The skills that I want to talk to you about, or at least point them out to you, are ones that have to do with where you are in the conversation. And so the very first step in crucial conversations is to get unstuck. We want to set the right conditions for the conversation that we're going to have. And so have you ever asked yourself, why am I stuck here? Why isn't this marriage turning out to be more like what I pictured when I first got started? What's holding us back? Why is it that I can't seem to move up the job ladder, that I seem to be flat-lined at this particular role that I'm serving now? Why is it that I can't get my ministry team to kind of embrace this new initiative that we want to undertake? Whenever you're stuck, whenever you're sort of feeling, I seem to be hitting a wall. Have you ever been there? Do you know what I'm talking about? Hitting the wall? We all have had those hitting the wall moments where I sort of figure I just can't seem to get past whatever that thing is. With my wife, with my volunteers, with my pastor, with my coworkers, with my neighbor, with my family, whatever. We become stuck over time when we find ourselves unable to solve our problems or to achieve our ambitions and goals. And the solution is to identify the crucial conversations that we need to kind of break open the logjam. The law of crucial conversations basically says this: stuck, you're not holding, or you're not holding well. Think about this for a second. Whenever you find yourself stuck, the world is not unfolding as you hoped that it would. There's usually a conversation that you're either not holding or you're not holding it well. And so 2 skills to get unstuck are, first of all, to identify where the problem is. Sometimes you can kind of just know right now. I mean, if you're stuck right now somewhere, some of you know right now what I'm talking about, because where you're stuck is already in your mind. You're thinking about, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I seem to be hitting a brick wall right here. So the first thing to do is kind to unbundle that problem using what we call CPR. And here's what CPR stands for. Is the problem you're facing in this particular relationship, is it a single instant of a problem? Is it just a one-timer? That's a content-related issue. That's what the C stands for. If the action itself or its immediate consequences is the issue, you have a content problem. That's what the C stands for. If you have a recurring problem, a pattern of behavior, that's what the P stands for, pattern, then you've got another kind of a problem. It's one thing when a situation is a one-timer. It's another thing when you've got a settled routine of a problem that's become a pattern. Or the R stands for relationship. Is it a relationship problem? How is the problem affecting your working relationship? If trust is low, if confidence is in question, what's going on? Sometimes when you're stuck, you have to ask yourself, well, what am I dealing with? What is the problem I'm dealing with? Is it a content issue? Is it just a single instance of a problem? Is it a pattern of behavior that I'm unhappy with that I need to address? Or is it a relationship issue where we're simply not on the same page? It kind of is amazing how when we kind of get caught up in the middle of a crucial conversation, we don't think this through. We don't think through what is the problem we're dealing with. We just know we're mad, or we're hurt, or we're anxious, or we're aggravated, or whatever, and the emotion speaks louder than anything else. And so unbundling with CPR is simply kind of stepping back and saying, okay, what am I dealing with here? Am I dealing with a single instance of a problem? Am I dealing with a pattern? And by the way, when you don't deal with single instances of problems, they become patterns. Yeah, exactly. You got it. And so the earlier you can kind of kick into mode in dealing with the crucial situation, whatever it might be, the more easily you are to be able to resolve it. But even if it becomes a pattern, you can still do something about it. And so part of the problem is that when we are kind of caught up in the hotbed of emotion, we don't really think rationally. And so in crucial conversations, you try to encourage people to kind of step back for a moment to get unstuck by, instead of thinking, well, this is hopeless and I'll never ever improve this, to say, well, just hold on here. What kind of a problem do I have? What is it that gives us some perspective and gives us a platform to get unstuck and to actually do something about whatever it is that we're facing, okay? And so getting unstuck is step one. If we had time, I'd get you to talk to each other about a conversation you're not holding or you're not holding well. And whether you're holding the right kind of a crucial conversation. Are you dealing with a single instance? Isn't it aggravating when you've had a single instance of a problem and the other person is treating like this is the way you do it all the time? We call that exaggeration. Doesn't that really make for great communication when we feel, anyway, I won't go there any further. So if we had time, we'd talk about it. So number one, we need to get unstuck. We're at a holding pattern. We're not communicating. Things have moved to silence or violence. We somehow have to break the logjam. The first thing to step is, what am I dealing with? Am I dealing with a single? Parents, are you listening? Am I dealing with a single instance of an unacceptable behavior? Is there a pattern here that needs to be addressed? Is there a relational thing that needs to be done first? It just kind of sets you free to begin to follow the rest of the process. Step number two is to start with heart. To work on the me first. What are my motives in this particular situation? What is it that I really want at the end of the day? I'll tell you, when I went to see my board member about this unauthorized visit that he made, my intention was not to hit him in the nose. I just want you to know that, okay? That was not what I wanted to do. But in the heat of the moment, that kind of was my first response. And so somehow along the way, I'd lost track of what I really wanted, which is a good relationship with this board member that would help us to work effectively in the days ahead. Refuse the sucker's choice that there is only silence or violence and there is no other way. There's always another way, and the other way is the way of dialogue. And so when you start with heart, you get your heart right by understanding what it is you really want. And if we don't get our hearts right, the outward strategies don't matter much. But if our hearts are right, it can make all the difference. We can start to move towards resolution. If you can get your heart right, you can greatly improve the probability of getting the dialogue right. And so when you're faced with pressure and strong opinions, we often stop worrying about the goal of adding to the pool of meaning, and we start to look for ways to win, to push, or to keep the peace. I want to talk a little bit for a moment about what I call the pool of meaning, okay? So you and I are having a conflict of some kind, or a difference of opinion, or whatever. And so basically think of yourself, I'm standing on one side of this empty pit on the ground, and you're standing on the other side. And what I'm hoping is a conversation with water, what I'm going to call a pool of shared understanding, okay? And the question is, how do I make sure that you and I both get our meaning into the pool so that we can have the discussion we need to have to resolve the issue? Because when the pool of meaning is dried, we've got two people sitting, staring daggers across, an empty field. But when you can increase the pool of meaning between you and get your perspectives and understandings on the table, you then provide the opportunity to kind of get beyond silence or violence and to actually dialogue and find the solution that you are kind of looking for. And so we need to get our hearts right by understanding what it is that we really want. I did not want to hit my board member in the nose. I didn't. I said I wanted to, but that's not really what I wanted to do. But somehow or another, high emotion kind of took me over the edge, and I handled it totally wrong. By the way, that situation never did resolve itself. And so that was a relationship that was broken. I was never able to repair. That's why these are so important. Because sometimes we can't step back when we've kind of made a critical error. And that's why this is so passionate for me. So the first thing that degenerates during a crucial conversation is our behavior, is our motive, and then our behavior follows. And so we kind of want to decide, what is our motive? My motive with my board member was to work through this issue so that we'll work together on praying for people after this, rather than working against each other, that he would not misrepresent me, that he would feel... My motives were great, but somehow the heat of the emotion blew all of that away, and as a result, I behaved in, a reptilian kind of way. The bottom line is this: if you don't talk it out, you're going to act it out. Isn't that true? You can sit there and you can hold back on your part of the conversation, but the reality is you still haven't changed your mind. If you can't talk it out and find a resolution, you're going to act it out. Honey, are you happy with this? I'm thrilled. No, we're agreed on this, aren't we? Sure. I mean, we have all kinds of ways of kind of letting the other person know that we may be complying, but we're not agreeing. When you start with heart, you're saying, okay, what do I really want for me? What do I want for us? What do I want for the situation? And then you're starting to think about some creative ways in order to bring that about. And so the question you want to ask yourself, am I behaving like what I want? I certainly wasn't with my board member. And what do I really want for everybody that's involved? And so I need to start with my own heart. I need to kind of sort of sort out, okay, I got to think of more than just the fool's choice, silence or violence. I want to think about dialogue. How in the world can we move to dialogue and actually begin to move this? Step 3 in the process of crucial conversations is to master your stories. And the byline for this is, how in the world do you stay in a discussion when you're angry, scared, or hurt? And by the way, we've all been there. And we've all been all three of those things somewhere along the way. The central skill for taking control of the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships is to master your stories. Isn't it interesting how we often, in our relationships with one another, have a certain number of facts? Okay? There's a certain number of things we know each other that we can take to the bank. But when we're vague and we're unsure, like for instance, about somebody's motive, about somebody's real intent, do you ever notice that we tend to fill in those blanks with things of our own construction? Okay? Master our stories is about actually coming to a situation armed with a bank of understanding based on our past circumstances, our view of ourselves and other people, and certain assumptions about the way the world works. And so what we want to do when we master our stories is to kind of get in touch with our own motives. Do we have all the details we need? Do we only have half the story? Are we jumping to conclusions here? Do I have all the information that I need? When it comes to strong emotions, you either find a way to master them or you fall hostage to them. The worst at dialogue are hostage to their emotions and they don't even know it. The people who are good at dialogue, the free flow of information, know that they need to control their emotions, so they fake it. But the best at dialogue are people who negotiate their emotions by thinking them through. Why am I feeling so strongly about this? Isn't it funny how many times when we're trying to figure out what our own motives are, we wait till the heat of the moment to try to sort out, why am I flying off the handle? Why am I behaving like an absolute idiot? Wouldn't it be encouraging if you could kind of think that through in advance and sort of be prepared ahead of time for what you might be facing in that crucial conversation? And so we talk about all of us we all follow a path to action. You know, there's something we see and hear. You tell yourself a story about what you've seen and heard, right? And then you generate a feeling about it, and then you act on it. We call that the path to action, and it's a part of understanding how we can avoid kind of getting to a situation where we're filling in assumptions, blanks with assumptions of our own. Our stories can betray us when we're guessing, when we act too quickly. If you don't master your story, it's going to master you. And so somewhere along the line in a crucial conversation, whether it happens in a flash, where all of a sudden you're in one that you didn't expect, okay, you know, what can I say? I mean, my mother's cheesecake is better than my wife's. I mean, I'm just telling the truth. I mean, well, but in the crucial moment, you need to kind of ask yourself, okay, how did I get to this place? How did I get from where I am to where I'm going? Because that gives you an opportunity to be a little more in control of what's going on. If you want to change your emotions, you need to change your stories. So you want to separate facts from stories. And sometimes you need to talk tentatively, you know. Hey, it looks to me like you're feeling this way. Am I right on this? Rather than just barging in full head of steam. How many conversations have you had, not asking for a show of hands, or people have had with you, where a person came in full of bluster like Hurricane whoever, and they just kind of unloaded to you because they had created a story, half of fact and half of fiction, and basically had derived a picture about you, or you had derived a picture about them, and before you could get out of the way, Hurricane whoever struck, and all of a sudden you've got broken pieces all over the place, okay? Many times, it's a lot wiser to step back and test whether or not your assumptions are right. Maybe you don't have the idea right. And mastering our stories is all about understanding about why am I feeling this way, but it's also thinking about how is the other person feeling. Maybe there's pieces of their story I don't know that I need to explore in dialogue. And you know what the stories are, right? Victim stories. Everybody know what a victim story is, right? It's not my fault. You ever had this come up in a job interview? It's not my fault. You know, a villain story, it's all your fault. So victim story says it's not my fault, I'm not taking responsibility, I'm just a victim. The villain story says it's all your fault, you're the one who's messing this up, it's your issue. We exaggerate often in the heat of emotion. Or the helpless story, well, what can I do about it? I'm just here on the totem pole and I'm not one of the big bosses, so there's nothing I can do to solve this problem because, like, who am I? Helpless story. None of those are very helpful in conversation and working through an issue. And so we don't want to tell ourselves these clever stories that help us to avoid dealing with issues. We want to deal with them. And so mastering your stories is about getting in touch with what's actually going on. What do I know and what do I don't know? And in the conversation, what can I do to begin to fill the pool of meaning by making sure I understand what's really going on for me and for the other person, the committee, whoever it is. Okay. The fourth step is called stating your path. And in crucial conversations, when we talk about stating our path, we talk about kind of exploring whether or not our perception is an accurate perception. Isn't it funny when we get high on emotion, we skip this step? Like we kind of go brain dead for a moment. We're more important about letting the other person know how angry or disappointed or hurt we are, as opposed to sort of trying to say, okay, let me test out and see whether I've got this straight. And so, there's a lot at stake. Because so many times in crucial conversations, we say things in exactly the wrong way. And so, there are 5 steps that kind of help us sort this through. And very quickly, they are: share your facts. This is the piece that you know for sure, okay? listen, George, I've noticed that this is the circumstance that we've had, and it has led to this, and it seems to me that you aren't on board with this project or this procedure. Am I right? Can you tell me your path? Can you tell me your understanding? Can you help me understand if I'm accurate or not? You talk tentatively, give the person to correct whatever needs to be corrected, and encourage testing, okay? Quite often when we are just full of emotion, we just roll in like a hurricane. Or we're so cheesed off, we just move to silence, and we just back off altogether, and nothing ever gets resolved. Until such time as two people or the committee or whatever can kind of get everything on the table, you don't get a chance to resolve the issue for everybody's benefit. And in crucial conversations, we always try to encourage people, don't think win-lose, think win-win. That's our goal. We want something that works for everybody in the conversation, not just for me or not just for them. And so you want to speak persuasively, not abrasively. And so you share your facts, you tell your stories, you ask for others' paths, always talking tentatively, testing it out, being prepared to let your story be corrected if new facts come to the fore. So a couple of questions we have to ask ourselves. Are we really open to what the other person thinks? Now, of course, we're all followers of Jesus because, you know, right? All of us, right? Okay, I'm not asking for a show of hands. Maybe I should be taking an altar call right here. No, we're all followers of Jesus, right? So we're all open to others' views because, you know, come on. Sometimes we come in with blinders on and we have a certain way of seeing things, and it's hard to kind of step back and consider maybe there's more to the picture than what we know. So you need to ask yourself about your own motives. Am I really open to another point of view? Maybe there's a better point of view than mine. Am I open to explore that? And am I confidently expressing my own point of view? Not abrasively, not shoving it down somebody's throat, but defending it and testing it and allowing it to be challenged by the person or the group that you're a part of. And so you want to come to a point where you actually do put your cards on the table. There is a time to kind of actually state your path. And the next thing you do is, when you've put your cards on the table, what's the very first thing you do? Not that anybody here plays cards, of course. You lay your cards on the table, what's the next thing you do? You wait, and while you're waiting, you do what? Yeah, you look at your opponent, because you want to see what their response is. So you state your path and courage on that. You look to see how they've responded. And so when you are learning to look, you are looking for signs that they're moving to silence or violence. You know, everybody has a certain style under stress. Some of us automatically go to silence. That's kind of how we're wired. Or some of us move to violence because that's how we're wired. You need to be aware of that because you want to get your higher functioning brain back into picture, step back, and actually see what's going on in the situation. And so when I am looking at you after I've kind of said, okay, here's what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, I'm trying to figure out, how are you responding to that? What's your feedback? Am I reaching you? Have you understood? Am I understanding you? So learning to look helps us to understand that it's just not important to get what's ever bugging us off our chest. We're moving towards resolution here. And so we want to see how the other person has responded. And so we call this step learning to look. And of course, what kind of signs kind of give away how it's being received by another person? What are some of the signs? Facial expressions. Body language, yeah. Pardon me? Size? Oh yeah. Oh yes. Listen, size can communicate a million things. Okay? What else? Tone of voice. Exactly. When you are in a conversation and the volume keeps getting louder and louder and louder, you know this isn't going to end well. Okay? And so when you state your path tentatively, like your story is not, you've mastered your story, it's not the only story in town, you really want to find out all the information you need, you expand the pool of meaning and you can make a much better decision if you can invite both people in. And so you need to pay attention to whoever it is you're talking about, the individual, the group, to see how they are responding to the truth that you've just kind of shared tentatively, to test it out, to see if you can find a way. So we call that step learn to look. And then the next step in the process is to make it safe. Every once in a while, when I'm involved in a conversation, a crucial conversation, sometimes something I said could be misunderstood, and a person can feel I'm taking a shot at them. Or sometimes a person can respond because they misunderstood what I had to say. And if I am paying attention to what's going on the other side of the table, it gives me an opportunity to go and address any understandings, you know. And so when you make it safe, step number one is, reestablishing mutual respect. Listen, George, your opinion is important to me, and I obviously have not quite got it right. Could you help me understand why you feel so strongly about that? You want to invite them back into the conversation by not getting into one of these, but to kind of try to really truly understand what it's looking like from their point of view. So if you've blown it, and by the way, is there anybody here who hasn't? Okay, well, you're in the right class then. Apologize when you've blown it. It's okay to say, listen, I know it sounded like I said that, it was an unfortunate thing, I didn't really mean it. Can we start again? I apologize. I mean, there's times when you don't apologize for everything. Don't you hate people who apologize for, like they apologize for getting up this morning? You know, they apologize for having cornflakes. I really don't care about all of that. I'm talking about apologizing when you've crossed the bounds of what's appropriate. Contrast to fix misunderstanding said is just basically using contrast, saying, I think you may have heard me say this, but what I really meant to say was this, okay? It's just using contrasting to make sure the other person understands your point of view. And then create a mutual purpose. Is there something that we both agree on that we can pursue together, whatever that might be? The next thing is to establish mutual purpose. Once you have shown the person that you respect them, how can you see if you can find some common ground upon which to work, a win-win solution that will work for both of us? And by the way, whenever you commit to a win-win situation, you're automatically giving up what? Right. The right to be right. The right to have only my way considered. If I'm looking for a win-win solution, I'm not looking for lose-lose. Okay? That's called compromise. And sometimes compromise has its place. But generally speaking, I want to move towards a win-win. So I want to come up with something that accomplished both of our goals, maybe in a way that we hadn't thought of. And so by making it safe, I'm trying to get their input into coming for a mutual satisfactory solution. Do I get there every time? Friends, we live in a broken world, and sometimes we don't always get it right. But if I go in with the mindset that I'm looking for something we can both live with, it totally changes the natures of those 10% of conversations that sometimes bring us down. Okay? And then the next step in the process is exploring others' paths. And when you're trying to understand someone, it helps if you kind of take the initiative to show them that you care. Ask them, have I got this right? Okay, what I think you're saying is this. And then you mirror what it is that they've said. And you say, am I on track with this or not? Have I misunderstood? Give them a chance to correct you. You can paraphrase. I think what you're saying, tell me if I'm wrong. I think what you're saying is this. Is this right? Or you prime the pump. I know that we're angry here and you're having a hard time sharing what's on your mind. Could it be this that's the problem? There's different strategies and skills you can devise to kind of explore the other person's path and let them know you respect them enough to include them in the decision. And then finally, am I actively exploring others' view? Do I really want to know what the other person thinks? Isn't it incredible how many times we get into a situation we really don't want to know what the other person thinks? We just want our way. I'm not asking for a show of hands. Parents of children, people who are in supervisory positions. You know, whenever you have kind of a position of power over someone, there's always a temptation to kind of run over that person. And when you're exploring others' paths, you're trying to take the way less traveled and say, well, no, I really kind of want to understand where it is that you're coming from. I want to hear what your point of view is. Maybe we can come up with a solution that is better than the one we've got now. And then finally, the last step in crucial conversations is to decide, well, okay, how are we going to get this done, follow through on this decision we've made, and how we're going to document who does what by when, and then follow up. And then go ahead and move ahead. There's another course that follows crucial conversations called Crucial Accountability, that once you've been through the crucial conversations process and you've established a common goal, how do you hold one another accountable for that? But we'll save that for another day, okay? Everybody good with that? And so when it comes to conversations, crucial conversations, those 10% that always do us in, those ones that sometimes we don't recover from, I never did restore the relationship with that board member. I dearly love Armed with Crucial Conversations to go back and have another whack at that one. I never did when I walked out of the room. That became something between us for the next 3 years. I wasn't able to kind of get over on the other side. Even though we're both followers of Jesus, that little piece of work on my behalf really didn't help mutual understanding and help us to work together as well as I would have liked to have had. If somehow or another, before we get into the heat of the moment, we can kind of think of get our executive brain or our rational brain back into the picture rather than going in high on emotion and adrenaline, we can actually begin to do a better job at dealing with these particular situations. Now, I have kind of just rolled over this lightning fast. I've just hit the tops of all of the mountains. But if I've intrigued you at all, there is a book called Crucial Conversations. And you can pick it up at Chapters, wherever you go, and it kind of talks about in more detail some of the things that I've mentioned. As I've gone along, if I've done a good job, all of you are saying, yeah, but what, but, yeah, but what, but this, what that, but that, okay? Buy the book, it will help you sort those things out. Grenny, it's Joseph Grenny, Dave Patterson, Al something, and Carrie Patterson, Ron McMillan, Joseph Grenny, and Al somebody. Okay? Anyway, big red book, and it kind of explains the situation. Also, I'm going to be walking our staff through this in the next couple of weeks because we've done it as a staff. I've kind of coached them through Crucial Conversations at more length. But I also, from time to time, offer kind of a 2-day, all-day seminar for people who are in ministries or in business who want to take Crucial Conversations. I'm doing one of these at Broadway Church on the 27th and the 28th of April. If anybody's interested, I can fill in the details. In that particular one, I go into far more detail and we actually work with some of the skills. Like, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, you know, great, you know, don't let your adrenaline run away with you, you know, be rational. But that's my problem. I just have a hard time being rational. Is there any way to deal with that? And in the Crucial Conversations certification seminar, it kind of allows you to work with those over a longer period of time and kind of get your hands on those. But today, I just wanted to kind of put this on the table for you. The bottom line is we're involved in Crucial Conversations all the time. And in children's ministry, we're involved in Crucial Conversations all the time. With parents, with my lead pastor, with the other members of my team, with visitors that come and didn't feel their child was treated properly. You know, there's all kinds of opportunities for crucial conversations to arise where the stakes are high, right? Emotions are high, and there's differing opinions. Well, how often does that happen in ministry? I don't know about you, but I think it's a weekly occurrence, you know, where I'm sitting. And so how I handle those 10% of congregation, a long way to my impact as a minister in children's ministry, discipleship ministry, whatever ministry you've come to undertake. So I wish for all my life that I had taken Crucial Conversations 30 years ago. I might have a couple of friends that I don't have today. Because sometimes you can recover and sometimes you can't. So I thought, well, why don't I take a preventative approach? Is there any way I can do better in some of these conversations? And so I've just kind of given you just the mountaintops, just kind of the basic idea of, is there a way out of those, you know, self-defeating conversations? There is. And Crucial Conversations, whether you take the seminar or just pick up and read the book, will help you kind of move towards kind of being less reactive and more proactive in those 10% of critical conversations that make all the difference. Now, we're kind of towards the end of our time, but I did want to take a moment to answer any questions anybody might have. Go ahead. I probably do somewhere. As a matter of fact, I hate to say this, I was going to bring a handout for each one of you. And then I thought, I don't know how many of you will be here. And so they're all sitting on my desk, which I'll use for the staff next week. So I apologize. I meant to bring those for you so you could just kind of keep those notes. So yeah, I can give you kind of the outline, and it will kind of give you an idea. In fact, why don't you write this down? M-I-C-K-N, Mick N, at BroadwayChurch.com. M-I-C-K-N, like Mickey Mouse, M-I-C-K-N, Nelson. Okay? At BroadwayChurch.com. And I can send you kind of my really super condensed notes to kind of give you just the basic outline. But the book really gives you examples and kind of walks you through at a greater length. And if you're interested at all in pursuing this any further, talk to me. You can kind of come and maybe be a part of the 2-day seminar at the end of the month. Crucial Conversations was originally designed for business situations where you've got a lot of stuff going on, money's at stake, so on and so forth. But I find that it absolutely makes all the difference in ministry as well. My big regrets in ministry are conversations that I messed up. The other things I can recover from, but some of those conversations that I can't go back and take back are the things that I thought, I know God forgives, but man, would I ever love to have a do-over if I could have behaved a little more. You'll never get them all right, but I'd like to get more right than wrong, right? And we all have crucial conversations in our lives every day. So anyway, that is just kind of a brief introduction to a way less traveled, to get off the adrenaline rush, to kick your brain back into action and saying, is there a better, more spirit-directed, more sensible, more mature way of dealing with some of these crucial conversations? Because if you're in children's ministry, you're going to have them, trust me. If you don't have them already, you're going to have issues from time to time. So let's try to handle these conversations as well as we can. Any other comments? Questions? There's so much. If we had 2 days, I could have said so much more of it. Hopefully at least you get the big idea and you understand what Crucial Conversations is about. All right. Well, thank you for your time and your attention. I appreciate it.